The Servant Girl Annihilator, 1884 to 1885, USA. Before the world knew Jack the Ripper, before serial murder had a name, a city in the American South was already living the nightmare. Austin, Texas, 1884. A booming capital city, proud of its gas-lit streets and growing population of nearly 12,000 souls. A city that believed it was civilized, a city that had no idea what was coming for it. 8 victims, 12 months, 0 arrests, ever. It began on a cold December night in 1884, though no one understood yet that it had begun. Molly Smith, a black servant woman, was sleeping in the servant quarters behind her employer's home on West Pecan Street when something woke her. Or perhaps nothing woke her. Perhaps she never had the chance. When the sun rose on December 31st, 1884, Molly was found outside in the frost-covered yard, dragged from her bed, her skull split open by an axe. Her boyfriend, Walter Spencer, was found wounded nearby, barely alive. He had no memory of the attack. No one heard a thing. The night had simply swallowed a woman whole and spit her out broken. The city stirred. The newspapers wrote a few lines. And then Austin went back to sleep, because Molly Smith was a black servant woman in 1884 Texas, and the world did not yet understand it had reason to be afraid. 6 months passed. On May 6, 1885, Eliza Shelley was found in her servant quarters, her head nearly cleaved open, her body dragged outside and left in the dirt. She had survived barely when neighbors found her still breathing, but she never fully recovered from what had been done to her. 3 weeks later, on May 23rd, Irene Cross was attacked in the same manner. Same dead of night, same weapon, same terrible silence before and after. She survived too, but the attacker had vanished again into the darkness of Austin's back streets as if he were made of shadow. People were starting to talk now, not with fear, not yet with confusion. Who would do this? Why servant women? Why always at night, always with an axe or something bladed and heavy, always dragged from their beds? The police investigated. They found nothing. They arrested black men from the neighborhoods, held them, questioned them, and released them. Because this was Austin in 1885, and suspicion was its own kind of justice. Then the summer came, and the killings accelerated. On August 30th, 1885, Mary Ramey, a young woman of only 11 years old, was found murdered in the servant quarters of the household where her mother worked. She had been dragged from her bed, taken outside, and killed with an iron rod driven into her ear. Her mother, Rebecca Ramey, was found alive nearby, gravely wounded, her head split open. 2 lives attacked in a single night. The city finally began to tremble. September brought no relief. On the 28th of that month, Gracie Vance and her boyfriend Orange Washington were attacked. Orange was killed outright. Gracie was dragged away from the scene, found later barely breathing, and died shortly after. 2 people in one night again. The killer was not slowing down. The killer was not hiding. The killer was, somehow, simply invisible. Austin was in open panic now. The newspapers, which had initially buried the stories in the back pages when the victims were black servants, began to scream from the front, because something had shifted in the killer's pattern, a shift that would make the entire city feel the cold. On Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1885, the Servant Girl Annihilator, as the press had now named him, reached into a different world entirely. Susan Hancock was a white woman, the wife of a prominent citizen. She was sleeping in her own home when she was dragged from her bed, taken to the backyard, and killed with an axe, her skull fractured beyond recognition. The same night, just blocks away, Eula Phillips, another white woman, was pulled from her bedroom while her husband lay wounded and unconscious beside her. She was found dead in the alley behind her house, mutilated. In a single night, in a single city, the killer had taken 2 white women of standing, and suddenly every rule about who deserved protection, every assumption about who the monster was really hunting. All of it dissolved into the cold Austin air. The Christmas morning of 1885 was unlike any the city had ever known. Men barricaded their doors. Women were not permitted to be alone. Gun sales erupted. Vigilante groups formed and prowled the streets looking for anyone suspicious, which in Austin in 1885 meant looking for anyone black or anyone poor or anyone who could not defend themselves with social standing. Dozens of men were arrested. A man named Nathan Elgin, a young black cook, was actually lynched by a mob, murdered without trial, without evidence, consumed by the city's rage and terror. He almost certainly was not the killer, but terror does not require certainty. The police were overwhelmed, embarrassed, and desperate. The mayor of Austin ordered the formation of a special police force. Investigators pored over the crime scenes, looking for something, anything. They had plenty of suspects, jealous husbands, transient workers, fired servants, men seen near the scenes on various nights. They arrested, questioned, and released. Arrested, questioned, and released. The courts saw witnesses contradict each other. Alibis held, evidence dissolved. One suspect, a man named Abe Wilds, came terrifyingly close to being convicted before the case against him collapsed. Another, James Phillips, the husband of Eula Phillips herself, was tried for his wife's murder. He was acquitted. And then, after the Christmas Eve murders, something happened that no investigator, no historian, and no criminologist has ever been able to fully explain. The killing stopped, completely, permanently, without explanation. Austin waited through 1886, tense and sleepless. Nothing. 8887 came and went. Nothing. The special police force was eventually disbanded. The newspapers moved on to other outrages. The city began, slowly and imperfectly, to breathe again. But the case was never solved. Not one arrest ever led to a conviction. Not one piece of physical evidence ever tied a specific man to the murders. The Servant Girl Annihilator killed at least 8 people, wounded several more, terrorized an entire city for over a year, and then vanished as completely and as silently as he had come. There is one footnote to this story that history cannot quite let go of. In 1888, 3 years after the Austin murders ended, a different city on a different continent began experiencing a series of attacks on women in the night. The victims were found in the streets, killed with blades, their bodies mutilated. The city was London. The killer was given a name that would echo through the next century and beyond: Jack the Ripper. Some researchers over the years have dared to ask the question quietly, without proof, as more of a haunting than an accusation. Was there a man who crossed an ocean? Who killed in Austin, stopped, and then began again in Whitechapel? There is no evidence for this. There is no evidence against it either. The Ripper was never caught. The Annihilator was never caught. And the terrible overlap of timing, of method, of eerie disappearance, it simply sits there in history, unresolved, the way all true horror tends to. Austin never put up a memorial for the women who died. The servant quarters where they slept, where they were taken from their beds, are long gone. Most of their names exist only in old police ledgers and yellowed newspaper columns. Molly Smith, Eliza Shelley, Irene Cross, Mary Ramey, Rebecca Ramey, Gracie Vance, Susan Hancock, Eula Phillips. They were real. They bled in real yards under real Texas stars. And whoever stood over them in the dark, whoever lifted that axe again and again through 12 months of horror, he walked away. He lived his life. He may have grown old somewhere and died in a bed and had no one know what he had done. That is the thing about true darkness. It doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always get caught. Sometimes it just stops. And you are left standing in the silence, wondering whether it is really over or whether it is simply waiting. The murder of Elizabeth Barraza, 2019, USA. Elizabeth Barraza was 29 years old, beloved by everyone who knew her, 2 days away from her 5th wedding anniversary trip to Disney World, and someone had been watching her house in the dark for hours before they killed her. This is that story. Liz Barraza was, by every account, the kind of person the world needs more of. Born on June 26, 1989, she had studied psychology at Sam Houston State University, where she met her husband Sergio. She was an avid fan of Star Wars and Harry Potter, and a proud member of the 501 Legion, a Star Wars fan group that cosplayed as the franchise's iconic villains and made regular charity visits to hospital patients, bringing laughter and costumes to children who needed it most. She worked, she loved, she volunteered. She had, by all appearances, no enemies in the world. She and Sergio were planning a trip to the theme park in Orlando, Florida on January 27, 2019, to celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary. To raise a little extra spending money for the trip, Liz had decided to hold a garage sale. She had put up signs around the neighborhood the night before. She had no way of knowing that putting up those signs had set something into motion. The morning of Friday, January 25, 2019, was cold and quiet on Cedar Walk Drive in Tomball, Texas, a suburban neighborhood northwest of Houston. Liz and Sergio began arranging items for the garage sale at around 6:17 in the morning. It was still dark, the kind of early that makes the neighborhood feel private, safe, enclosed, just you and the familiar shapes of your own yard and your own driveway and your own life laid out in neat rows. Since Sergio had an early morning work call, he left the house at around 6:47 a.m., while Liz continued setting up outside. He kissed his wife, got in his car, and drove away. He did not know it was the last time he would see her standing. What neither of them knew, what Liz could not possibly have known, as she arranged her items in the thin morning light, was that a dark vehicle had already been watching. Investigators would later piece together, from surveillance footage collected across the neighborhood, that a dark-colored truck had been seen driving through the Princeton Place subdivision at around 2 a.m. that same morning. Not passing through, lingering. The truck had been parked in the lot of a nearby Goddard school before the murder, idling in the pre-dawn dark. Someone had been waiting for Sergio to leave, at approximately 6:52 a.m. Just 5 minutes after Sergio's car disappeared down the road, 3 of Liz's neighbors heard the sound of gunshots. They called 911 immediately. A CCTV camera pointed toward Liz's residence captured the sequence of events. A black pickup truck moved slowly past her house, turned onto the next street, and came back. The figure inside exited the vehicle, walked up the driveway toward Liz, and shot her at close range. The shooter fired 3 shots. Then, as Liz hit the ground, the killer fired 1 more shot. All 4 wounds were in the upper torso, head, and neck area. The truck then passed Liz's driveway a second time after the crime before disappearing. By 6:58 a.m., officials arrived on the scene. When EMS reached her, they called for Memorial Hermann Life Flight, a critical care air transport out of Houston. Liz was alive barely when they loaded her onto that helicopter. She had been shot 4 times in her own driveway, in front of her own garage sale, 2 days before her anniversary trip, and somehow her heart was still beating. After hours in the emergency room in the shock trauma ICU, at 1:40 p.m. on January 26, 2019, Elizabeth Barraza was pronounced dead. She was 29 years old. When investigators began to work the scene, the first thing that struck them was the absence of chaos. This had not been a robbery. Nothing was taken. There was no struggle, no signs of a fight, no emotional messiness of an argument turned violent. The detectives discovered the killer had left almost no physical evidence at the crime scene. At the scene, they found only 1 round of small to medium-sized caliber, possibly a .380, presumed to be from a revolver. No murder weapon was found. A revolver. That detail matters. Revolvers do not eject shell casings. The suspect had chosen this weapon specifically, a weapon that leaves behind almost nothing. This was not a crime of passion. This was not a robbery gone sideways. Someone had chosen this weapon, worn a disguise, scouted this neighborhood through the night, and waited patiently for the husband to leave. This was a planned execution. The footage was grainy enough that investigators could not even determine with certainty whether the killer was male or female. The figure appeared to be wearing a wig and a long coat to conceal their identity. There was a face on the tape, and it told them almost nothing. Detectives turned to the people closest to Liz. In homicide investigations, the first circle examined is always the inner one. When Sergio rushed back to the scene after receiving an alert from the home's alarm system, detectives questioned him immediately. He handed over the doorbell camera recording without hesitation, though it had captured only the sound of the shooting, not the image of the killer. His co-workers confirmed he had been at work. He was cooperative. He was devastated. But the investigation turned up something that could not be ignored. Investigators found that Liz had a life insurance policy. In the case of murder, Sergio was set to receive $500,000, double the standard payout amount. $500,000. It is the kind of number that changes the shape of a conversation. Officials followed up on Sergio's bank and cell phone records. They found nothing suspicious. He took a polygraph test and passed it. He was ruled out as a suspect. The circle widened. Sergio had mentioned to investigators a strained relationship with his own father. He told police that Oscar Barraza Sr. had been cheating on his mother with multiple women, was financially unstable, and that his last paycheck to Liz had bounced, and that Liz had possibly confronted him about it. A confrontation, a bounced check, a daughter-in-law who had looked a man in the eye and said something uncomfortable. When investigators questioned Oscar Sr., he admitted to the infidelity and explained the bounced check as a matter of awaiting a client payment. His bank and cell phone records showed nothing unusual. He took a polygraph test and passed it too. One by one, the people who loved Liz or who had reason to want something from her were examined and cleared. The inner circle held no answers. Police then focused on the possibility of a murder for hire. They looked at Liz's phone, her social media, her text messages, any digital footprint of conflict. A thorough check of both Sergio's and Liz's cell phones revealed no evidence of marital problems, no secret enemies, no threatening messages. Liz Barraza, as far as anyone could determine, was exactly what she appeared to be. A good person, loved by the people around her, with no known reason to be dead. And yet someone had driven to her house at 2 a.m, waited in the dark for 4 hours, and shot her 4 times as she arranged second-hand items in her driveway. The reward money began to grow, a slow signal of how desperate the situation had become. Initially, Crime Stoppers had offered $5,000. Sergio's brother raised funds through GoFundMe, bringing the total to $20,000. As of 2022, the reward stands at $50,000. The Harris County Sheriff's Office worked in tandem with the FBI and the Texas Rangers. Investigators said they had received Crime Stoppers tips from around the world. And yet, after all of it, they were still no closer to finding the killer. The dark Nissan Frontier pickup truck, identified as a 2013 or newer, black 4-door model with a distinctive Pro 4X sticker, was released to the public, broadcast across news stations and social media. Someone, somewhere, had to recognize that truck. Someone had to know whose hands were on that steering wheel at 2 a.m. on Cedar Walk Drive. Nobody came forward. If you go to whokilledlizbarraza.com today, there's a tracker at the top of the page counting the days since her death, more than 2,000 days now, and still rising. Her family built that website with their own grief, counting every single day that justice has not arrived. Her father, Bob Newell, has spent years standing at press conferences and making the same plea to the same cameras asking for the same thing, for whoever knows something to say it. Bob was diagnosed with stage 4 esophageal cancer that has spread to his liver, lungs, lymph nodes, and spine. He has lost more than 150 pounds and relies on a feeding tube. He is running out of time, and he knows it. His dying wish is to know who killed his daughter before he goes. "I would not wish the last years of our life on anybody," he has said. And still, the case has no answer. The most terrifying element of this story is not the violence, it is the precision. The killer knew about the garage sale, knew it was happening that morning, on that specific day, knew when Sergio left for work, had scouted the house through the night, had dressed to avoid identification, chosen a weapon that left no casings, and vanished into a Texas morning so cleanly that 6 years of investigation by sheriffs, rangers, and federal agents have produced not a single arrest. Someone in Liz Barraza's world either did this or paid for it to be done, or knows who did. Someone went home that Friday morning, washed their hands, and went on living. Someone has been living with this for more than 6 years now, at birthday dinners, at holiday tables, in the ordinary silence of an ordinary life that continues uninterrupted, while a family counts days on a website and a father waits to die without knowing why his daughter is gone. Liz had been 2 days away from Disney World, 2 days away from celebrating 5 years of marriage to the man she had fallen in love with in college. She had put up garage sale signs the night before, the way any ordinary person does on the eve of an ordinary Friday, with no reason in the world to believe the morning would be anything other than a morning. It is the ordinariness of it that stays with you. The garage sale signs, the early alarm, the husband driving to work in the dark, the items laid out on a driveway for strangers to browse, the whole small recognizable texture of a life. And then a truck that had been waiting for hours pulling up and everything ending in 5 seconds. With 4 shots and no shell casings, and a figure in a wig walking back to a black pickup truck and driving away. Gone into the daylight, into 6 years of silence. The Spy in the Bag, Gareth Williams, 2010, England. On August 23, 2010, police knocked on the door of a top-floor flat at 36 Alderney Street. The flat belonged to MI6. The man inside had been dead for over a week. He was found naked, curled inside a red North Face sports holdall, zipped shut and padlocked from the outside. The key to the padlock was beneath his body. His name was Gareth Williams. He was 31 years old, one of the most gifted codebreakers in the British intelligence services, and no one, not the Metropolitan Police, not MI6, not a coroner's inquest, not a forensic review that ran until 2023 has ever been able to explain with certainty how he got inside that bag. This is that story. Gareth Williams. He was born on September 26, 1978, in Valley on the Isle of Anglesey, a quiet corner of North Wales, where his father worked at a nuclear power station and the landscape was all gray coastline and open sky. From his earliest years, it was clear that Gareth existed on a different intellectual plane from the people around him. His secondary school maths teacher would later say that Gareth was probably not the best mathematician he had ever seen, but the best logician. If you explained something once to Gareth, he remembered it. You didn't have to explain it again. While still a student at Bowdoin Secondary School, he began studying mathematics part-time at Bangor University. He graduated with a first-class degree at the age of 17. A first-class degree in mathematics. He went on to complete a postgraduate certificate at St. Catherine's College, Cambridge, and began a PhD at the University of Manchester, finishing it by 21. He was, by any measure, the kind of mind that institutions pursue rather than wait for. And so in 2001, the Government Communications Headquarters, GCHQ, Britain's Signals Intelligence Agency, came for him. It was, as his old maths teacher put it, the inevitable destination. It didn't surprise me at all that he was very interested in codes and ciphers. It didn't really surprise me that he was recruited by GCHQ. For nearly a decade, Gareth worked at GCHQ in Cheltenham, In that quiet, classified world of signals and interception and mathematical problems that most people on Earth do not have the clearance to even know exist. He rented the same room in Prestbury, Gloucestershire, for the entire time, a modest, stable, private existence. He was a keen cyclist, described by those who rode with him as something like a red bullet on his bike. He visited his family in Wales regularly. He never spoke about his work, and his family, loving him, knew not to ask. In spring 2009, Gareth was seconded from GCHQ to MI6, the Secret Intelligence Service, in London. His role was at the cutting edge of intelligence collection, finding ways to use new technology for covert operations, bridging the increasingly important collaboration between signals intelligence and human intelligence. Evidence later presented at his inquest suggested he had attended both the Black Hat briefings and the DEF CON hacking conferences in the United States in the months before his death. He may have been working on penetrating US and UK hacking networks. He may have been preparing for an undercover operation. His childhood confidant, Sian Lloyd-Jones, would later reveal that 8 months before his death, Gareth had been given a second passport by MI6 and was training to assume a new identity. But Gareth had not settled happily into London life. He found the culture at MI6 alienating, the rat race, flashcar competitions, and post-work drinking culture. As it was later described, a world entirely at odds with the quiet, solitary, physically active life he preferred. He had requested to return to GCHQ and the countryside. He was due to go back in September 2010. He never made it. The last confirmed sighting of Gareth Williams alive was captured on CCTV footage at Holland Park Tube Station on August 14, 2010. He looks in the footage relaxed, ordinary, a slim young man in casual clothes going about his weekend. On August 15th, a Sunday, he was seen on CCTV in the Hans Crescent area of Knightsbridge, high-end shopping territory near Harrods, that afternoon just after 3 p.m. He was filmed walking down Alderney Street in Pimlico carrying 2 shopping bags from Waitrose. He turned toward number 36, the MI6 flat, and went inside. That was the last time anyone saw Gareth Williams in the world of the living. That evening, evidence from the inquest suggests he cooked one of the peppered grill steaks he had bought at Waitrose and ate his supper alone in the flat. In the early hours of August 16th, his laptop was logged on to a cycling website, the kind of late-night browsing a man might do alone before going to sleep. And then, sometime in those hours, something happened. On August 16th, Gareth Williams failed to attend a scheduled meeting at MI6 headquarters at Vauxhall Cross, less than a mile from his flat. His line manager, known at the inquest only as Witness G, later admitted to the coroner that he deeply regretted not raising the alarm sooner. Instead of immediately reporting a missing intelligence operative, MI6 spent a week conducting its own internal inquiries. 7 days. A week in which a body lay in a locked bag in a bathtub while the intelligence services tried to handle the situation quietly. It was only on August 23rd, when Gareth's family reported to police that they had not heard from their son in 10 days, that the Metropolitan Police finally went to the flat. The officer who first entered, PC John Gallagher, described what he found in measured, careful words at the subsequent inquest. He noticed immediately that something was wrong. On the table, laid out with an odd neatness, were 4 items: a mobile phone, 2 SIM cards, and a woman's wig. He moved through the flat and reached the ensuite bathroom off the master bedroom. In the empty bathtub sat a large red North Face Sports hold-all. A padlock connected the 2 zippers, locking the bag shut from the outside. "I am realizing it is something serious," Gallagher told the inquest, "and my concern was to not damage anything in a crime scene." He did not need to open the bag to know. The smell of decomposition had already told him everything essential. But when investigators finally cut through the padlock and unzipped the hold-all, they found Gareth Williams curled inside, naked, knees drawn toward his chest. The key to the padlock was discovered beneath his own body. The flat's heating had been left on at the highest setting in the middle of summer, accelerating the decomposition to the point where the Home Office pathologist, examining the remains, could not determine the cause of death. Not a drug, not a poison, Not a wound, nothing. The body had been too far gone, no signs of a struggle anywhere in the flat, no signs of a break-in at the door. No DNA belonging to another person found anywhere, not on the lock, not on the bag, not on the bath. His palm prints were not on the rim of the bathtub, and yet there he was, inside a padlocked bag, in a bath, with the key beneath him. What followed was one of the most tangled, frustrating, and deeply strange investigations in British criminal history. The first and most fundamental question was brutally simple. Could Gareth Williams have gotten into that bag himself? Investigators commissioned experts in confined spaces to attempt to replicate the feat using an identical holdall. They tried hundreds of times. Flexible people, trained people, a yoga expert, again and again. The conclusion was the same. It was effectively impossible for a person to zip and padlock such a bag from the inside, in a bathtub, without assistance. One forensic expert told the inquest flatly, "I believe he was placed in the bag by a third person." Pathologists noted that if Gareth had been alive when he entered the bag, he would have suffocated within approximately 3 minutes. 3 minutes of darkness inside a locked bag in an empty bath. The second question was equally disturbing. Who else had been in that flat? And here the investigation began to fracture. Police released EFIT images of a couple of Mediterranean appearance, seen near the building in the days before the discovery. A man and a woman, seen at the flats. They were never identified. Investigators would later concede they were unlikely to ever be traced. A single unidentified hair was found at the scene, leading to later hopes as recently as 2021, when a forensic review was commissioned that advances in DNA profiling might extract something useful from it. In November 2023, the Metropolitan Police confirmed the review was complete. No new DNA evidence had been found. No new lines of inquiry had been identified. The intelligence dimension of the case was, from the very beginning, aggressively contained. On the day Williams' body was discovered, the head of MI6, Sir John Sowers, met with Britain's most senior police officer. According to the Daily Telegraph, Sowers sought assurances that the investigation would not stray beyond its remit. At the subsequent inquest, witnesses from MI6 gave their testimony from behind a large blue screen to protect their identities. The precise nature of Williams' work, what operations he was involved in, what he had discovered, what he might have known, was ruled off limits in the interest of national security. The inquest was given, as one account put it, intriguing but incomplete insights. A reference to Williams having used a different name during his work was shut down almost as soon as it was opened. What the inquest did reveal, from the civilian side of Gareth's life, was a series of details that the press fell upon with a kind of frenzied, sometimes ugly fascination. Police found in the flat approximately £20,000 worth of women's designer clothing, shoes, dresses, accessories in boxes, apparently unworn. About half of the internet browsing history on his computers was in the area of women's high fashion, handbags, cosmetics, gloves. His search history also included visits to bondage and claustrophilia websites. And in 2007, 3 years before his death, his former landlady in Cheltenham had once found Gareth tied to his own bed in boxer shorts, unable to untie himself, calling for help in the middle of the night. 4 days before his death, he had attended a drag cabaret in East London. He had tickets to 2 more similar events. His closest friend, Cian Lloyd-Jones, pushed back hard on the narrative the press was constructing. She told investigators she did not believe Gareth was gay or a cross-dresser, and that the women's clothing was likely purchased as gifts. His senior MI6 witness confirmed at the inquest, with a kind of bureaucratic firmness, that his work certainly did not involve dressing in women's clothing. But none of that resolved what those items were doing in the flat. None of it explained the bag. The coroner, Fiona Wilcox, delivered her inquest findings in May 2012 after 7 days of testimony. She concluded on the balance of probabilities that Gareth Williams had been unlawfully killed. His death was, in her words, unnatural and likely to have been criminally mediated. She acknowledged what anyone following the case already felt in their bones, that most of the fundamental questions in relation to how Gareth died remain unanswered. A year later, in 2013, The Metropolitan Police conducted their own evidence review and arrived at the opposite conclusion. They determined it was more probable that no other person had been present at Gareth's death and that he had most likely died alone, by accident, in some private activity that went catastrophically wrong. His family rejected that finding. They said the coroner's verdict of unlawful killing accurately reflected the circumstances of their son's death. Two official bodies, two contradictory conclusions. One man in a locked bag, and the British intelligence services, throughout the entire process, maintaining a silence about the nature of his work that has never broken. There is a theory discussed carefully, never proven, that Gareth Williams had stumbled across something he was not supposed to know. That the work he was doing at the intersection of MI6 and GCHQ, possibly involving Russian networks, possibly involving hacking operations, had brought him to the attention of people who wished him very specifically and very professionally dead. Russia's intelligence services have a well-documented history of targeted killings on British soil. The scene itself, the professional-grade absence of evidence, the obliterated forensic trail, the heating turned to maximum to accelerate decomposition, the padlock placed just so, reads less like an accident and more like a message, or a demonstration of capability. Or both. But there is no proof. There has never been proof. And the nature of the intelligence world is such that proof, in cases like this, has a way of never arriving. In November 2023, the Metropolitan Police closed their most recent forensic review of the case. No new DNA, no new suspects, no new lines of inquiry. Detective Chief Inspector Neil John stated that any further information or evidence will be reviewed, which is the institutional way of saying, we are done unless something changes and nothing is expected to change. Gareth Williams was 31 years old. He had a first-class degree at 17. He had a PhD at 21. He had spent his adult life doing work of national importance in a classified world he was not permitted to describe to the people he loved. He wanted to go back to the countryside, to his bicycle, to a quieter life. He was scheduled to leave London in September 2010. He died, alone or not alone, sometime in the early hours of August 16th, inside a locked bag in a bathtub in a spy agency's safe house, 1 mile from the building where he worked. The key was beneath his body. His palm prints were not on the bath. His DNA was not on the lock. And somewhere in the city that night, in Pimlico, or Vauxhall, or wherever the people who know what happened to Gareth Williams went afterward, someone walked away from 36 Alderney Street and into the ordinary August darkness of London. They have never been found. They may never be found. The bag has been unzipped, and the body has been buried, and the coroner has delivered her verdict, and the police have delivered theirs, and the intelligence services have kept their silence, as intelligence services always do. What remains is a red holdall, a padlock, a key, and a question that the most powerful institutions in Britain have spent 15 years failing, or perhaps choosing not to answer.